Hello fellow cyborgs, and welcome to the third and final day of my self-imposed middle grade readathon. So I have 2 books left in the stack of 5 that this week I wanted to reread as part of my middle grade YA books that I wanted to reread for Hindsight is 2020. And those are Serena by Donna Jo Napoli and The Tale of Despero by Kate DiCamillo, illustrated by Timothy Basil Airing. So let's go back to the early morning when Amanda woke up and decided what she was going to read first. Good morning, it's 6 a.m. and I'm going to start off with Serena by Donna Jo Napoli and see how far I can read in that this morning. So I'll let you know what I think when I have some thoughts to give. Okay, so it is now the late morning and I have read half of Serena. This is in 4 parts, I think. Let me see. There are 5 parts and I just finished part 2, but I'm like just about halfway. On the back, this says is for ages 12 and up, but I really think this is more of a young adult novel than it ever will be middle grade, and I don't really think that this would necessarily be appropriate to hand to a 12-year-old without caveats. This is set in ancient Greece, and Serena is a mermaid. She and her 9 sisters are on this one island, and they are trying to win their immortality by having men fall in love with them. They use their song to lure the men onto the rocks, and then the shipwrecked men they theoretically can make fall in love with them with their song. But wrapped around this need for immortality, it's also this need for just sexuality and romance. Serena, who's our POV character, is very clear that she just wants a dude. She talks about what she's looking forward to physically, she talks about her lust, she talks about her passion. So for at least the first part of this book, her primary motivation is I want to have sex. Like, this sounds like a great thing for me to do. And then the bonus is that she'll get immortality as well. So I just find it kind of perplexing that Napoli decided that this primary motivation is the one that she will write for these mermaids for a middle grade novel. Serena herself is 17, which by traditions of YA that would put it as YA because normally the age of the protagonist is the age of the reader. And also the sexual content, there hasn't been any explicit scenes or anything, but like her motivations of having sex and having a man fall in love with her, that's a more teenage adult topic. So I wish that this was securely in YA or even an adult historical novel about ancient Greece through the lens of a mermaid. So overall, what I'm feeling right now is that this is pretty good, but why was it aimed at children? And I wish that there was more of it. I wish that we didn't just have 200 pages, but that this was more of an epic, sweeping, let's dig deep into historically how ancient Grecians lived or how Napoli imagines that. Let's dive deeper into the mermaid mythology. But instead, we have this in its really strange place in children's literature. Things I like about it, though, is that the ancient Greek myths are very real to Serena. She loves hearing stories. That's one thing that is common among mermaids, and so you get to hear a lot of the ancient Greek myths retold, just as Serena's talking about her life and about what she thinks might be happening. And from what I remember, the bulk of this novel is about Serena being on her own, not with her sisters, and getting to know this man who's been stranded on an island. And Serena does not want him to fall in love with her. She is ethically opposed to the nature of mermaids. She and her sisters were horrified to see that when they called the men to their shores, the men drowned. They did not think that the men on boats would not be able to swim. And her sister, who was mourning for one of the drowned men, she gets stoned to death, beaten to death by the surviving men on the sand. And that's a pretty grisly thing that happens in like chapter 2. And so after this, most of the other mermaids feel like their immortality matters more than anything, than any mortal man's life, and they are going to get that immortality no matter what. And Serena's just completely opposed to this, and she leaves. So the interesting thing that's happened right now, and this is just a minor spoiler, is that Serena has accidentally sang before this man who's stranded on the island, which means that he now loves her, and she did not want this to happen, but she sang because she was being threatened by a bear. So now it'll be interesting to see what happens in the second half of this, which I only remember a couple things, but not enough for me to really say, and to see just how she like ethically and morally copes with this fact that, okay, I'm immortal now because he loves me, and I wanted him to love me selfishly, but I decided that that wouldn't be the right thing, the right moral thing, and now accidentally it's happened. And so how is she going to be able to reconcile that she got her heart's desire without plotting to, but she's also like morally opposed to the fact that this happened? So this is quite enjoyable, but I'm still like mostly just perplexed that this is like children's fiction. I don't think that it really belongs there, and I'm surprised that past me like wasn't more freaked out by some of the stuff in here. I must have just like blocked it out. So I think I'm going to pick up The Tale of Despero now to kind of break up my reading so I don't just binge Serena all in one go and forget nothing or forget everything about it. And I'm hoping this will be a really quick read because it's got super big margins and, you know, fairly big font and also illustrations. So we'll see what I can read about this, and I will get back to you with updates of Despero and Serena if I read any more. Hello, fellow cyborg. So it is now about 10:30 the next day, Friday the 11th, and I have finished Serena by Donna Jo Napoli and as well The Tale of Despero. So I didn't update you last night because I was too darn lazy, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you my final thoughts here and kind of wrap up this whole like week-long sporadic middle grade readathon. So there were a lot of things that The Tale of Despero had going for it that really worked for me. There's a very playful narration style where the reader is addressed themselves and even directed to go to the dictionary and look up the definition of the word perfidy because it will be coming up in the story multiple times. And there's cheeky foreshadowing in this manner as well, and I really like that. It reminds me a lot of Anthony Trollope's writing style and how he will address the reader and, you know, tell them, I'm going to tell you this even though other authors wouldn't. I enjoyed the illustrations, which are kind of like black and white sketchy watercolory looking sort of things. Let me see if I can one-handedly show you one. They don't all look like this. Normally they're just like on one page, but that's kind of what they look like. It just adds something. This is definitely well put together. It has pretty end papers and it has a naked hardcover that isn't super boring. So I can tell that there was a lot of effort that went into producing The Tale of Despero and making it seem this epic thing. But for me overall, somehow it just like didn't connect with me emotionally. We follow three characters whose tale intertwines because the events of the story take place over the course of, I don't know, like maximum probably 6 months, I would expect. We start out with Despero's birth, and he's the last mouse born to his mouse parents. He has really large ears so he can hear things that other people can't, and he was born almost with his eyes open, so everybody's kind of skeptical of him from the beginning. It turns out that he knows how to read, and he falls in love with the princess in whose castle he lives. However, pretty quick in the story, Despero, because of his communication with the princess, is banished to the dungeon, which is the ultimate mouse punishment, where his family expect that he'll be eaten by rats. The second character that we follow is a rat. His name is Chiaroscuro, mostly called Roscuro, and he is a rat who ends up loving the light, but when he tries to leave the dungeon, something really bad happens. His heart breaks, and this book says that it was put together wrong. So when he goes back to the dungeon, his whole life now is getting revenge on the princess who did something bad to him when he was up in the light. So he's the main villain of this, and he manipulates the only main human character, whose name is Mig. She was sold into slavery, in essence. Her father sold her for a blanket of chicken and cigarettes to this man, and for about a year or some, she's his slave. She eventually gets rescued because some soldiers come to the house that are demanding spoons and soupware because soup has been outlawed in this kingdom, and they take Mig back to the castle. But she's kind of a lazy worker, and she's also quite fat because she's lazy, so we've got some questionable fat shaming stuff there. You could say she's like questionably disabled because her former slave master would smack her on the ears so much that her ears are now deformed and her hearing is not very good, so it's only people who shout that she can hear. Chiaroscuro ends up using her to try to get back at the Princess P. The kitty wants in. So I enjoyed learning about Meg. I think she was a complicated character, and I didn't really love how she was slow and hard of hearing and kind of lazy, and then bonus on top of that, fat. I think it was not totally like explored well in a way that I can, you know, really relate to. But I think for the most part there was just a very like fable fairy tale element to this. Hi kitty, come on up. You can do it. I've seen you do it before. That somehow just didn't click with me. So when I first read this, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, and I think I will keep that at a 3 out of 5 star rating, but I don't think I'm going to keep this on my shelves because there wasn't enough specialness to me to really want to keep it. And then last night, quite late, I finished Serena by Donna Jo Napoli, and this actually really surprised me in a really positive way. So my main critique, which I told you about yesterday, is that this is rated for 12 and up. I believe this would be shelved in the middle grade section, but this needs to be shelved in the YA section at the very least. And I think that if this book had been longer and a little bit more adult, you could have even made this an adult novel that I think would have held up. So the strengths of Serena lie in Serena herself, in talking about the mermaid way of life and culture that's in there enough for me as a mermaid file to really appreciate. The other positives of Serena is that she ends up on this island with one man. His name is Philoctetes, and he ends up telling her a lot of Greek myths, but also storytelling is a big part of the mermaid culture as well. So you get to hear a lot of Greek myths retold by Napoli throughout this. The other thing I really liked was the idea of like the morality of the siren song and the value of immortality or not. And also just on a very basic level, the island of Lemnos is really vividly described. So the atmosphere of an ancient Greek island is very much present. You get to hear about the wildlife, about the foliage, and so there's a lot of just like quiet, slow, solitary nature sort of writings of this island. So I was really pleasantly surprised by Serena. At first I thought it was weird, but after the initial, oh, she really wants to bang somebody and then bonus immortality, it really improved. Her relationship with Philoctetes was nuanced and touching. I liked the ending and also how this weaves in the Trojan War. We get to even see Odysseus, and this book poops all over Odysseus from the Odyssey as well, and I'm very much anti-Odysseus, so I was really pleased about that. And interestingly enough, there is a play called Philoctetes written by Aeschylus, so an ancient Greek play that Libby Stevenson recommended as one of the Greek plays to try, and having just read this and hearing quote unquote about Philoctetes' time on the island of Lemnos, I want to read that as soon as possible and see what Aeschylus's take on Philoctetes was. So I really enjoyed this and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So it's been a really interesting week rereading these middle grade books. I was really surprised that my 2 favorites of the week were the ones that I had the least expectations for, and those were The Midwife's Apprentice and Serena. The 2 books that I was most looking forward to rereading because I knew I loved them, which was Island of the Aunts and The Maestro, actually I didn't love them as much on this second rereading, though I still appreciate them and will be keeping them on my shelves. And I'm glad that I reread The Tale of Despero because I knew I liked this, but I didn't know why and I remembered nothing of it. So now I have better thoughts on this as a whole and I can appreciate it for what it is, but don't need it because I don't need to keep it on my shelves anymore. So thank you for watching this vlog again and the vlogs that came before. If you really like these reading vlog style things, let me know in the comments down below because I don't know, I'm not quite sure if I like them more than traditional videos or not. I'm just kind of continuing to experiment. Please let me know in the comments down below if you have one middle grade book or YA book that you would recommend to me that you just adore and think that I should give a try. I'm always out for more recommendations, why not? And until next time, continue to be lovely.